TNT goes behind the drama of Heartland for a conversation with Treat Williams.
Dr. Grant, how do you define your current role at St. Jude?
Oh, I'm just a guy with a knife and some string, really. The first attraction was the level of David Hollander's writing. I think what David's dealing with, the concept of organ retrieval and people getting a second chance in life, and how that affects the lives of the central characters and the lives of those donors and recipients, is something I've never seen dealt with.
She tried to kill herself.
Well, the only reason I'd report Mrs. Walker to psych is if she didn't want to donate her organs to her daughter. David starts me off as a pretty tough customer, and I think will remain so. But I think the audience will get glimpses into the complexities of this guy. Nathaniel Grant is a true believer. He has a heart and a sense of the mystery of life that is so great and so deep that he doesn't show it to anybody. He has a very strong visceral connection to the donors, and that will come out as the show progresses, but he's very connected to those dead and alive who have offered up parts of themselves so that other people can still walk the earth, and that becomes a very mystical part of the show. I know how this sounds, but sometimes I can see the donors in my patients.
You can see Sarah?
And how that sounds. Primarily, he has the arrogance of a surgeon. I think there's a lack of fear, knowing that there will be failures. I think these guys have to confront the possibility that the patient will die, and patients do die, and yet they still are able to keep their feelings at bay and do the work. I think he's certainly type A. I've taken almost every organ that you've rejected over the last 5 years, flown them an extra 5 hours, and used them on patients that you would never accept, so no, I don't think I misunderstand your approach. I've always liked the idea of playing people who are kind of unfinished and still have problems. Even though he's 50, he still hasn't figured a lot of stuff out, and he's working it out. Well, whatever you do in your relationships, don't use me as a role model. The relationship is on the outs as we are introduced to these two characters, but I think that there's a mutual respect there, and I think as co-workers, he's not really her boss, but when she fails to provide an organ, you can see that there's a degree of annoyance on his part. No luck getting that donor, County General?
Look, I know I screwed up. I don't need your passive-aggressive bullshit to remind me.
I just exhaled. She's also as good at what she does, an extraordinarily difficult job, as he is at his. And what I'm really liking is that we can see that these two people are willing to sublimate their egos for the sake of their 13-year-old daughter. She's a good person. I have you to thank for that. I don't think he is as good at parenting as he wants to be. Well, hopefully he'll become better at it. And that workaholic part is an interesting thing. He actually is prolonging people's lives and feels this enormous responsibility to that. So there's always that way to say, well, I have to be at the hospital. There's a heart coming in at 2 a.m. and I've got to be there. In a way, he can actually justify being a workaholic much more easily. Synchronize, Vancouver.
Please, stop calling me that.
I got 1023, you?
Same.
You ready to do this, Vancouver?
My name is Simon or Dr. Griffith, whichever one you want to use.
Bring me a perfect heart, Doctor. I think the thing that David writes into this character that I just so love is that you think, God, this guy's just heartless. And then at the least likely moment, you'll see that there's a human being underneath all that toughness.
She's just so weak.
We'll keep her strong. And we'll transplant her successfully. But I think people want to work with him because he is the best at what he does, and they will learn. But he's not easy on them along the way. But that's the process for these young doctors. I think it's going to be a long journey from Vancouver. It looks ischemic.
We had a little problem.
I can see that. Chris Martin is one of the funniest men I've ever worked with, so what's really hard about working with him is I can't keep a straight face. I keep saying to him, if you want to get home on time, you're going to have to stop doing this to me because I'm not going to get through this take. We find in the second episode that Dr. Jonas actually did not make the cut here. When Rock and I started working together, there was also wonderful chemistry for us. These guys, as much as they butt heads, there's this sort of immediate mutual respect and a kind of begrudging warmth between them, which I hope will continue.
The risks that you took were huge when you first started off.
These guys, I think, are also action junkies. When they bring somebody in, there's a chance to save a life and move a heart from one person who's just lost their life into someone who's about to lose theirs and give them a second chance. I can do this. I can make this work for you.
When are you going to understand that none of this has to do with what you want?
Oh, the fun thing with Dabney is I've known him for about 15 years. I've always thought he was one of the best, if not the best, dramatic and comedic actors who has both chops.
You're such a sissy.
Because I have the history with Dabney, we're able to play two men who've known each other for a very long time. There's a wonderful connection, so I just love days when he comes to work.
You asked me what I would have done.
I did.
I would have approved that procedure in a second. You can't be afraid of what's next. We don't know what we're going to learn. That's why I always said yes to you and why you said yes to Jonas.
I think he finds in that character an equal who knows him very well and tells him the truth.
I wouldn't rush to retransplant her.
Well, she'll die if I don't.
You can't cut every time there's a problem.
You can get a little too ambitious to try something new. And what is the downside of that? Well, you can lose the patient. But if you never try something new, you're never going to move things forward.
You can't guarantee a heart will come in time.
Any heart that comes available tonight, I will take it and I will make it work for her. I promise you. I did 4 years, I never would, so there was a great deal of learning the basics of doing checkups and just basically dealing with patients and dealing with just the physicalities of medical equipment. This show, I was really interested in this concept of open heart surgery and transplants, and so there was a lovely man that took me to UCLA, and I observed for about 8 hours an open heart surgery on an 18-month-old boy. And they allowed me to stand right in with the inner circle, right at the table, and then move around the table to the different positions. I think the one time it was tough was I was invited to come around where the anesthesiologist was, and coming out of the head of the table was just this little tuft of brown hair, and I just lost it. I was gone. I had to kind of compose myself. But it's so huge when you think about how far we've come and that they were repairing the heart of this 18-month-old boy. I was really in awe, and it was quite wondrous.
And we're set.
This crew has done an extraordinary job of stepping up and working extremely long hours, but it's like a birthing process. Every department wants their work to be great. You're trying to figure out the characters, you're trying to figure out the look of the show, you're trying to figure out the kind of the personality of the show, and consequently it takes more time. We have a new location. Oddly enough, even though we're in a hospital that was a hospital, it's a very, very difficult location to shoot in because if you could see up, the ceilings are very low. There's no access to power. Even though these rooms were used for operations, they weren't used for lighting movies and television, and it's a very big difference. Everybody works very, very hard here, and we're trying to figure it out. I know that we're going to get it down. I have a philosophy about good television. I don't think there's a good show, a great show on television that I've ever seen that wasn't an ensemble show. So my hope is maybe Nathaniel Grant is at the heart, of the first few episodes, but the show will build into something where you really need all those characters to make it work. It's much more interesting, it's much more fun, and sometimes I get to go home for dinner.
Heartland, an all-new series, Mondays following the closer, premiering June 18th on TNT. We know drama.